Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson of HuskerBigRed.com. This is Danny Gillette, my co-host of the GreatCornholio.org, and we're here to talk some Matt Rhule after, he was introduced yesterday at the press conference. I know I saw you said you were ready to go through a brick wall, Danny. So, are all the walls at the house okay? It didn't got some big holes in them from you running through them yesterday?
We may have some small holes, but luckily the damage isn't too big, so I don't have to pay too much out of pocket.
But Matt Rhule did a great job yesterday. I know Trev Albert said he didn't want, wasn't worried about winning the press conference, but Matt Rhule definitely won the press conference yesterday, and I don't think that he did it by doing anything fake. He's real. He wants to win in the trenches. He wants to be at Nebraska, and those were some of my early impressions. But what were your reactions to Matt Rhule yesterday?
My reactions were basically the same as yours. I mean, quite honestly, we saw a tweet from him about 2 hours ago, 6 a.m., already in the building. So I really liked, he emphasized toughness. He emphasized physicality. He mentioned getting players that wanted to wear the N. And I think that's huge because that's also how you build. Another thing he talked about, which is family. And I think that the family part of it ties into good player development and things like that. So all the things he said kind of lined up with each other, and that was great to see. I know people are tired of winning press conferences and just want to win games on the field, but it definitely helps when your coach is a good public speaker. I mean, there are some coaches that just aren't good at press conferences. Matt Rhule, I mean, I was ready to play for him about 10 minutes into his speech yesterday, and I'm really excited to see what he can do, and I think he really, I think he really wants to be here. I think he really has a vision for this place, and it may take time. He said, this is going to be hard, and we kind of all know it's going to be hard, but I think he can get it done.
Yeah, I think he can get it done too. He needs to win on the field and not just the press conference. But, yeah, I feel good about. Again, it's all the things that we've said, but he's talked about, you can't win if you can't win in the trenches. And I think everybody understands that, especially, after this year, but throughout the entire, Scott Frost era, that was an issue. And it's been an issue since, really, even before Bo Pelini left. Wisconsin was running over us with Melvin Gordon and whoever that every single running back they've trotted out there has ripped off like 60-yard runs. It's
Jonathan
ridiculous.
Taylor, I
Yeah.
remember. Ugh.
Braylon Allen. It doesn't matter. Joe Schmo off the street, Joe Schmo walk on off the street from Wisconsin runs for a touch. It's like just on repeat, and so that's got to stop. But yeah, it was interesting to have Fickle and Rhule doing these press conferences, and Trev, I thought it was pretty open about the search. He said he talked to 13 different coaches. Not necessarily all candidates, but he said that Rhule was the 1A all along, and I kind of believe him because it doesn't seem like they made a real hard push at Luke Fickle and some of these other guys, like Lane Kiffin and even Fickle. These are guys that I think Lane Kiffin wants the Alabama job and Luke Fickle wants the Ohio State job. Matt Rhule, I think he wants to be at Nebraska. Like he said yesterday, he could be sitting around doing absolutely nothing right now. He could be playing golf. He could be, getting ready to watch the World Cup today, and getting paid the same amount of money. But he chose to come and coach football at Nebraska because he loves this. He loves the game. And, I think he's really going to, love this program. And that's a huge thing. He's having guys that actually like football, and that's a huge tenet of what Michigan does, is getting guys that, Jim Harbaugh talks about that all the time about his team, that I don't have to make these guys want to do it. I have to pull them back because they love football so much. And I think Matt Rhule's going to get those kind of players here. And I get a lot of Jim Harbaugh vibes from Matt Rhule. I really do.
And he also said he wanted to be a big part of the Husker community, which I thought was really great to hear.
Yeah.
He doesn't necessarily have to do that, but I always love seeing coaches really embrace the place that they're coaching at. And, it seems like, you know, it was interesting to hear him say, he said his daughter said something to the effect of, you know, will we have to move again? And he said no. So I can't imagine being a coach's family and just having to move a lot and not having a ton of stability. So I'm really excited to see them really embrace the Nebraska community because the fans are there, especially if you win. And I'm hoping that he can be an active figure in the community and you know really drum up support. I mean, you look at his Twitter before he came here, it was at like 74,000, I think it was. Now it's up to 90. I'll have to check a number, but I know he got like 20,000 follows in a day. So that just speaks to the community that the Nebraska, fans have. And I think that's something that, he can really gravitate to.
Yeah, and he definitely, he feels comfortable being the face of the program. He's not he's very comfortable in his own skin. I thought it was interesting. He talked about how he learned from his failures at Carolina because look, everybody's. I mean, go back. Let's talk about Bill Belichick for a second. He got fired from the Cleveland Browns because he wasn't a good coach there, and he learned from that job, and then he came back and he became the greatest football coach of all time. I mean, literally. So just because he didn't have immediate success at Carolina in 2.5 seasons or whatever does not mean that he's not going to win here. And I love his recruiting philosophy. I like that he's already out there offering some guys in Texas, and I think he's going to do some nice things with this 2023 recruiting class. And I know the question about Mickey is obviously still out there, but I think with Mickey, I think it's more up to him than it is to Matt Rhule because
Yeah.
Mickey's been mentioned with the Tulsa job. I would be shocked if Tulane didn't. I mean, if Tulsa's interested in it, why wouldn't Tulane be? I mean, that to me just seems like such a perfect fit because who is going to do a better job of keeping New Orleans kids, at Tulane
Yeah.
than Mickey Joseph? Nobody. So, I mean, I think that, it's like, yeah, I'm sure Matt Rhule. I think Matt Rhule does want Mickey to be here, but it's I'll say this, I don't think money's going to be an issue because that was probably my biggest takeaway that I didn't
$7
even write
million
about.
assistant
$7
pool.
million. I don't care about Matt Rhule's contract. I knew it was going to be big. It's like President Carter said, that's just that's just doing big business, and Nebraska's in the Big Ten. Nebraska's got a ton of money. There's a bunch more money coming too with because think about this contract. Yeah, it's going through 2030, but that new TV deal's coming through, and there's going to be even more. So it's like the money is not going to be an issue, and I'm glad that the president and everybody, the board of regents, and everybody is behind this because it's not like Trev can make that decision by himself to say, oh, I want you need to have support, and that's what Matt Rhule is talking about. The presidents and all that stuff because when you have all the people in your administration aligned and they all want to win and they all have the same vision, that makes a huge, huge, huge difference.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, just because of past history, was he said that two of his major recruiting states were Texas and Florida. Now, we could definitely see the Texas flair. He's offered two kids yesterday, and I'm just interested to see how the Florida part of it translates because we've tried Florida and it hasn't really worked out so well. So I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just curious to see, how um, this time in Florida will be different from the previous regime. And yes, the previous regime sucked, so I don't think it's going to be too much of a leap. But I'm curious to see how many Florida kids he'll get to stay here. And I think, he can do it if he continues to build the program and develop and things like that. So I'll be intrigued to see how the Florida part of it comes into play.
Yeah, I think it's outside. I think they obviously this focus a lot on Texas and the state of Nebraska, keeping the good players in Nebraska home, and then I think it's just Nebraska needs to recruit at a national level on some way. If they're going to be successful, they need to get kids from Florida and California and Arizona and Pennsylvania and all those different areas. So I'm hoping that he can help with more of that, and that his I know some people want to say that I think being an NFL head coach helps you as a recruiter because as a player you want to get to the NFL, and I think he's really smart in saying I don't want to just help players get to the NFL. I want to help them get a second contract, and that shows that he really understands. For a player, that's everything because that first contract in the NFL, even with the rookie pay structure, it's not a game. I mean, it is a game changer. I don't want to say it like that, but it's not the career ending type of contract that you get when you get that second contract. So I think he is understanding that from an NFL perspective, and I think he's going to get a lot of players here that are thinking he's going to help me get to the NFL. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see how he does in like Florida and Texas and all that. But I think once they start winning, they can start going at it from more of a national perspective like Nebraska has when it's been a successful program.
Well, when you look at his coaching history, I mean, he's covered across the board. He started at Penn State in '98 as a volunteer assistant. Then he was a defensive line coach at Buffalo, UCLA, a running game coordinator at Western Carolina in 2005, offensive coordinator for Temple, obviously, assistant offensive line coach for the Giants. He's kind of covered across the board. And I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't know this, I'm just speculating, if that played a big part in this hire as well. I'm wondering if Trev saw Rule's, experience at multiple positions and said, okay, this is a guy that we need leading the program because he's seen a lot. And, I think that's important. And just looking at his coaching resume again, he's kind of dabbled into a little bit of everything, and that's certainly important as well, especially because it gives you a broader perspective. It's not just the offensive or defensive side of the football. It's kind of like, you know, seeing the broad picture from an entire organization point of view.
Yeah, I do like that. He's not calling plays, and in terms of the offensive line, yeah, he's coached offensive line, so I mean, he understands how important that is. Defensive line, yeah, like you said, he's really done everything, and that's what I like about him. He's got tons of great connections. We've got. And that's the thing, another guy too. We talked about a little off air. Ed Foley's been announced as another hire for Matt Rhule, and there hasn't been any reports on what his what his position's going to be, but I'm just looking him up here, and he got his start really coaching offensive line. He coached offensive line at 3 different schools, basically FCS programs. That was like his first almost 15 years of coaching was in offensive line. At Temple, he coached tight ends and offensive line, so maybe maybe he could be coming here to coach special teams, be associate head coach or assistant head coach. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. Looks like the past 2 years he's spent as a special teams coach, but that's another guy with background, tight ends, offensive line. So maybe Foley is going to do that. They haven't really said just that he's going to be on staff. So that's still a big hire though. And I like that Matt Rhule is getting some of these guys that he's been comfortable with. Corey Campbell's coming over as the strength coach from the Panthers, and
He looks
that's
jacked.
yeah, he does look
Yeah.
jacked, and he was the assistant strength coach, I think, at Baylor and at Carolina. So kind of a step up for him. But once you've been in the NFL and he's done, he's been close enough at the Power 5 level, I think it's a good opportunity. So I mean, I like some of those moves, guys that you trust. Get them in here right away and get to work. And I think we'll be hearing about some more coaching moves here soon. But what do you think about some of the early hires? We had the Satterfield, the OC from South Carolina yesterday. You talked about him on the show. But yeah, what do you like? What are your impressions of his first, additions to this staff?
Honestly, the fact that they're getting a new team nutritionist is huge. And I'm not trying to be funny. I know I like to be funny, but you see, you saw Nebraska offensive line get pushed around. You saw the linebackers get winded. You saw them look slow. And it all starts building that area with nutrition and strength. So I think that will be huge. I think conditioning was a huge, huge issue for this team, and it's the reason why they weren't able to, kind of lose close games at the end, so to speak. And but I think the team nutritionist will be huge. Honestly, I think a new strength coach will be huge because that entire group there needed an overhaul in the worst way. Um, but on the the bigger hire, so to speak, right after you started editing this show yesterday, Scott Satterfield was hired. Wait, no, Scott is it? No, Marcus
Marcus,
Satterfield.
yeah,
Yeah, there you
Marcus
go.
Satterfield.
Satterfield. Okay, so you know, I think he's interesting. I like him. I understand fans have reservations about him. Um, there were reports that he didn't even call plays in the final 2 games, but we'll see. I'm willing to wait and see. Um, I think he will be able to bring a running element to this team. And also, with these numbers, you have to remember that South Carolina isn't exactly the most powerhouse program in the SEC. I mean, there's a huge gap between, the Alabamas and the South Carolinas. So I'm in a wait and see mode. I don't necessarily think that this is a bad hire. I was actually pretty excited about it, but I'll be interested now that we have the pieces, in terms of building a line and people who want to build a line, how that goes.
Yeah, and I like Satterfield. I mean, I haven't seen that where he wasn't calling plays, but I mean, South Carolina wanted to keep him, so I really don't. I don't think that was an issue. I think he did a good job in the last two games. Obviously, they played South Carolina played Clemson and Tennessee, and they scored 94 points in the last two games. So, I don't think that's an issue. And yeah, people get caught up in these stats and stuff too. I mean, Shane Beamer's just building this program up, and Spencer Rattler's first year there, and they won. They're 8-4, but yeah, South Carolina's not. I mean, you look at they got to play Georgia, they got to play Florida, they got to play Tennessee. I mean, it's a tough league. So people said this. People said a lot of the same things about when Michigan hired Jesse Minter last year because he was the Vanderbilt defensive coordinator, and all their he looked like he had one of the worst coordinated. It doesn't matter. That stuff does not matter. It's about coaching fit, and this guy's really he's been an offensive coordinator for almost 20 years. He's been a head coach at the FCS level. He was Matt Rhule's offensive coordinator at Temple. He was part of the staff at Baylor, calling plays. So it'll be interesting to see what if he's just the straight offensive coordinator, because I still think we're going to see some other guys come in as like co-offensive coordinator or passing game coordinator or whatever kind of titles they can give to guys. But I'm interested to see who's going to coach quarterbacks, but he's got a nice background with that. And, look, he got Spencer Rattler to play pretty well at the end of the year. I know this entire season, Rattler didn't play like a Heisman candidate like everybody thought he was a couple of years ago, but the offense looked pretty good a couple of weeks ago. And if you look at his, the way that he kind of approaches offense, I think it's not going to be like a round, square peg into a round hole. He's going to adjust it to the personnel. So, I mean, it could work with Casey Thompson. It could work with, some other guys out there. So I think it's a good move. And I'm not worried at all about the South Carolina, offensive rankings. I think that's irrelevant.
Speaking of which, I heard and I saw you kind of retweeted this yesterday that Matt Rhule was meeting with Casey Thompson and his father yesterday. I wonder how that meeting went. I'm very interested. I would have loved to have been a fly on those walls. And Casey Thompson was at the Matt Rhule presser yesterday. So I mean, if he comes back, that's enormous.
Yeah, I think it would be a nice stabilizing factor for a year. And I mean, he did an interview with Husker Online, and he was talking about Marcus Satterfield's offense, and how he thought it would be a good fit. He was
Yep.
reviewing kind of their tape. So I don't know. It seems to me there's a good chance of him coming back. Him and Garrett Nelson are probably the two guys. O'Shawn Mathis, if they could get him back, I think would be a good thing. But to me, he seems like he probably has a chance to go to the NFL. I mean, he had 8 pressures in that Iowa game, so he had 32 pressures for the year, and so I could see him maybe getting drafted or at least being like a priority free agent. But those would be the 3 guys I would really focus on. Garrett Nelson, Casey, and just for the leadership aspect of it too. I mean, if you get Casey Thompson back and Garrett Nelson back, I don't think you're going to lose very many players. And I did think that was pretty cool of Matt Rhule to say that I'm coming here to be your coach, and if you don't want to be here, that's fine, but I'm not going to run guys off. You know what I mean? So hopefully he can get some of these guys to stay, and I'm sure he's definitely working on that.
Absolutely. And, I kind of had the same takeaway there. I thought it was really good of him to say, 'cause some coaches just come in and clean house. And, you have 50 guys gone by, Wednesday, and then you have to rebuild an entire roster. But, I'm curious. I think in addition to Satterfield's offense, I think the coaching staff's ability to build an offensive line could only help Casey. I mean, we saw how many times he got hit and pressured last year, and he hung in there, got some tough hits, and if I'm Casey Thompson, I take a look at that offensive line building experience and the experience the coaches have in manning the position, And that really stands out to me in addition to just offensive scheme, because that kind of gives me reassurance. And I said this a couple weeks ago. If I'm Casey Thompson and I want to come back, I want reassurance that this line is going to be better in 2023. And I think from what we heard on yesterday, Monday, I think, there's a very good chance that this line is going to be better than last year's. Heck, it can't get any worse, but I think there is a plan in place.
And just even, well, I mean, for one thing, it looks like our the guy who was supposed to start, I always forget his name, but he got suspended last year. It
Dewey?
looks,
I don't
yeah,
know
it
how to
looks like
pronounce
he's
his name,
coming
but
back. He said he's basically said he's coming back. So I mean, that
good.
would help. But honestly, I think if you put out the same five guys with this coaching staff, with Matt Rhule and whoever he hires, I think they would just be exponentially better, because I don't think Donovan Raiola should ever coach offensive line at any level ever again. He has no idea what he's doing. I mean, go back to high school, man. I mean, my God. I mean, seriously, I've coached some youth football, I mean, like middle school level, and it's like guys know how to get out of their stance at least, for Christ's sake. I mean, Jesus. Anyways,
Same thing with Greg Austin, but on a much less level. I mean, guys
yeah.
could at least get out of their stance. The line was still awful, but yeah, no, Donovan Raiola was not good at all. So much for that. But that's looking into the past.
So I mean, but I guess my point, I do think they're
Yeah,
going to make some additions, but I think just on the fact that these guys are going to get better coaching, better strength coaches and all that type of stuff. I think that all that's, even if it's the same guys, I think they're going to be better than they were this year. And because the fact of the matter is, some of there are going to be some of the same guys next year. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know if you're going to find an entire offensive line in the transfer portal.
no,
Hopefully, like they can get Teddy Brijaka healthy and playing well, but we'll see. I do think that they're going to definitely make some additions there, though, for sure. When in the offensive line and defensive line, quarterback potentially. We'll see. At receiver, I don't know if they really. I don't know if the need is that desperate at receiver. I know they lost Trey Palmer, but
well, if
if you,
Mickey leaves, then it will be. Yeah, I think
yeah, because yeah,
because I
we'll
do see
see.
Malachi going if Mickey leaves.
I mean, I think it's going to put it in jeopardy. I don't think it's guaranteed though, because Mickey's not going to go. Because the thing about it is, Mickey's not going to. I don't see Mickey going somewhere that's like on his list. You know what I mean? I don't see Mickey going to like Georgia or
That's
Oklahoma
true.
or. So that's where I don't know if Mickey's going to be somewhere that Malachi's going to want to go. And he did retweet some. When Matt Rhule was announced, he
That's
retweeted
right.
it
He
and said
did. Yeah.
like, "Let's go." So I mean, I think Matt Rule's going to have to recruit him like everybody else, but I really think that he wants to be at Nebraska. I feel like through all of this stuff, Scott Frost getting fired. I mean, he could have very easily taken some very other some different decisions, some different paths in his process, and he still wound up in Nebraska. And I get that Mickey Joseph's part of that, but I think there's more to it than just Mickey. I really have to believe that, because you don't see players like that committing to you know a school just based. To me, it's about more than just Mickey Joseph. That's my thought on it. But I do think that obviously Mickey, if he is here, then Malachi, I don't think we have to worry about him at all.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I also think, just getting back to the offensive line really quickly, it's not just last year they had no coaching. They haven't had solid coaching in like 4 years, 5 years. So you know there's a lot of ground to make up here. There's a lot of potential, but I'll be curious to see how this all plays out, because we talked about winning the trenches, and if Nebraska can do that, we'll be in much better shape. But yeah, no, I was over the moon when I had tears in my eyes during the press conference. It was great. I mean, if there's one thing that can be said for certain, it is that he's a great public speaker. Like you said, though, it's going to have to translate to the field. But I was really excited about yesterday, and I feel like the staff is going to, be able to lead this program forward in the direction that we've so desperately wanted it to.
Yeah, and he said he wants to have the staff in place by Friday. So I don't know if that's gonna, fully happen, but we'll see. Elijah Robinson, the Texas A&M coach, has liked some, Nebraska tweets and is following some Nebraska, reporters and players. So I don't know, that there might be something to that. We haven't heard anything about the defensive coordinator position. So I'm wondering if if Elijah Robinson is, like I said, going to be a co-defensive coordinator, or if it's going to be Jeff Collins or Phil Snow. I mean, the thing about it too, Phil Snow's 66. I mean, he could come in and just be an analyst. I mean, he's always been with Matt Rhule, and that doesn't mean that, he has to actually coordinate, or he could even be, so if Mickey goes, he could be associate head coach, So I mean, not every guy like there's Michigan had a guy Biff Poggi, and the Athletic just did a story about him and how he's been so critical as Michigan's associate head coach. Well, he's not a defensive coordinator or anything. So I mean, just having a guy that you trust that knows what you want could be important on the staff. So I still think that Snow is going to be at Nebraska in some way, shape, or form, but might not be as the defensive coordinator. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but Robinson, I mean, that would be a way to try to get him away from Texas A&M, is to say, hey, you can, coordinate this defense, or at least be the co-defensive coordinator, and pay him about $1.5 million. And I'm guessing that's probably what they're paying Satterfield, is about $1.5 million. And then you look at, Mickey wants $1 million. And, so I think you could have 4 coaches who are making, about $1 million, or maybe one that's making, $2 million. And that's what you need to do to get these big time coaches. And it definitely matters. And Nebraska didn't have any big time coaches. I mean, outside of, they thought they had one in Scott Frost, but everybody else was a bunch of no names, and they turned out to be flops essentially.
Yeah, and if Nebraska were able to get Robinson, I mean, that would also help them tremendously in the state of Texas. That would just
Yeah.
continue their Texas vision. And honestly, I think that's an area that has a lot of talent that we need to explore, because there's a lot of good athletes down there. There's a lot of good athletes in Florida. And so while I do think it's important to recruit in the state in Nebraska, I do think this Texas area has a lot of potential.
Yeah, and like I said, Deuce Vaughn was a 3-star out of Texas that never even got an offer from the Longhorns. So I mean, there's really talented players. You just have to find them, and I think Matt Rhule has a lot of connections there, and he's going to be able to do that. So and he, he's talked about before in the past about recruiting. If you're going to miss on speed, so I mean, expect that you're going to see a lot of athletes getting recruited here to Nebraska. Fast guys, big, strong guys that can be developed, and some of them are going to be raw, and some of them are going to take a little bit of time to develop. But I think he's going to build the type of program that can have consistent success in the Big Ten and be physical and do all those types of things.
He mentioned speed in his press conference yesterday, and I think it's something that Nebraska has needed for quite a while. So I'm curious to see. I'm assuming a lot of the wide receiver position and running backs, how speed kind of translates onto the field, because speed is something we've desperately needed. We've been able to get it out of a couple of players, but if speed were able to be something that this program really looks for, I think that will definitely help them.
Yeah, and I think on the defensive side of the ball too. I mean, there's the thing about it is people look at tackling and all this, and look, tackling can be a technique thing, sure. But you've got to be, if there's a really freak athlete on the other side of the field, you got to have freak athletes to tackle them. I mean, that's just the way it works. So you got to have guys that are fast and strong, and literally sometimes it's just a matter of being able to break down and not have a guy juke you out of your shoes, because you're a good enough athlete not to do that. So I mean, I feel like the speed and athleticism on the defensive side of the ball gets overlooked, with edge rushers. But, especially look at the difference between Ernest Hausman and Nick Heinrich. I mean, nothing against Nick Heinrich, but one guy can run and one guy can't. I mean, it's just, I'm not saying Nick Heinrich's slow, but compared to Ernest Hausman, he
It's
is. You
very
know what I mean?
noticeable. I will say that. It is
Yeah.
very noticeable.
I mean, it jumps off the, it's like Levante David when he played at Nebraska. That's the kind of speed that I think Matt Rhule's, talking about. And those are the kind of players that, look, Nebraska used to be able to get them all the time. And I'm not worried about the Matt Rhule recruiting rankings, because I think that, because this Nebraska program, when it's been absolute just trash, I mean, we've still been recruiting top 25 classes for the most part. So once this
That's
thing
my
gets,
thing.
yeah, once this thing gets rolling, I don't see any reason why this class should ever be ranked outside the top 20. And frankly, if that's where you're recruiting, right around the top 20, and you're being smart with the transfer portal, that's enough. That's enough to at least get you right into the 12-team playoff, or at least have enough talent to be a consistent contender for it. And if Nebraska if they can get into that playoff a few times as a 12-teamer, I mean, that's really at the end of the day, that should be the goal. I mean, I think that that's a realistic goal for this program within, the next 5-6 years, and to finish as a top 12 team, so we'll see what happens. But I feel like, as college football is expanding, I'm not saying it's going to, Nebraska's obviously going to go on a playoff run or something, but once you get it, it's like anything, man, you got to get there to have a shot. So
And we've seen, these 4 stars, the linemen were 4 stars at one point, and that's gotten us nowhere. So, I mean, it's all about development. It comes back to development, and this is a staff that can develop. I'm not really too concerned about stars in class rankings for this particular staff because I think that they can develop kids at a high level. So obviously, I don't want our class to be ranked, 200, but I'm not top 25 classes. We've had those before. We've had good recruiting classes, and a lot of it hasn't panned out, quite frankly. So I'm more interested to see what they can do. And, to me, this staff seems like a really good identifier of talent. And so if we had, I don't know, like 15 3 stars and no 4 stars, I would trust the staff to be able to make something out of that versus previous staffs where we've had, I don't know, like 4 4 stars or 2 4 stars and been able to do absolutely nothing with it.
yeah, I mean, it's the evaluation. Yeah, rankings do matter. The stars matter. I'm not going to say they don't, but what matters more even than that is just being identifying and finding ways for those guys to kind of fit in your system. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you get a talented football player if he doesn't fit what you do, or if he doesn't fit into your philosophy. I mean, fit and coaching and all that stuff. I mean, it really is everything. And I think that's what's great about the transfer portal is you can see that guys can go from one program to another. And, so I think Nebraska is definitely going to take advantage of that. And that's another area where you're going to have to, the transfer portal is almost like NFL free agency anymore. And there's going to have analysts on staff, who are just saying, hey, these are 100 guys coming up on, on the transfer portal that we could look at that could help us here, and here. And you're going to have to go scout those guys as much as possible, their recruiting tape. And, I mean, the FCS level, I mean, it's insane right now, the number of players that are going into the transfer portal. I mean, it's not even conference championship week. I mean, it is conference, but those games haven't even been played. And like, Cade McNamara is in the transfer portal, which I mean, I expected, but I think everybody is getting into it now because they know that next week it's going to be, bing, bang, boom. And if you don't think that, there's recruiting going on behind the scenes right
Oh,
now
yeah.
with, guys like Braylon Allen and all that. I mean, I'm hearing that Ohio State might lose Travion Henderson. I
Ooh.
mean, USC's coming for a running back, and there's Braylon Allen's been connected there. Travion Henderson's been connected there. I mean, Xavier Worthy from Texas took down all of his Texas stuff off of his social media because there's talk about him transferring. I mean, it's crazy.
The other thing too is is that these upperclassmen are seeing all these freshmen get some very lucrative NIL deals, and they're like, "Hey, I want a piece of that pie too." So,
Yep.
NIL has changed the game a lot, and I think you can build a team in the transfer portal. Is it the way to do things 100% of the time? No, you still gotta, I believe, recruit at the high school level. But with the amount of talent that's in there, I think Nebraska could get some really strong players. I mean, you look at the haul that we had last year. Trey Palmer, Anthony Grant, Brian Buschini, perhaps our most consistent player this season. You know, there is talent to be found there, and I'm very intrigued, especially with some of the names in there already. What's coming down the road as Nebraska looks to continue to build the program?
Yeah, and I think a lot of connections, a lot of playing time, and look, I mean, people respect Matt Rhule around the college game, and everybody was talking about him as a candidate for major jobs. So I do think it's a huge coup that
Auburn.
Nebraska, yeah, well, yeah, and he turned down Auburn, which yeah, went down the Hugh Freeze, way. So yeah, it's really interesting. But I think if you look at all the hires, Fickle, Freeze. Maybe Colorado's hiring Deion Sanders. I'm not sure, but I still think that Nebraska got the best coach. Honestly, Fickle I think is is good, but I don't know. I don't see him being able to build this thing the way that Matt Rhule is going to be able to.
That's my thing too. I don't know if he would be able to build a program from top to bottom, and this is exactly what Nebraska needs right now. The cupboard right now is bare, and Nebraska needs to get talent at multiple positions. And I think I I don't know if Fickle would be able to do that. I think Rule can. Time, of course, will tell, but the Big Ten West is filled with good coaching right now, so it's going to be a lot of fun, I think, over these next couple of seasons. And I'm just looking forward to August already. It's crazy. The season just ended on Friday, and already I want August to come. And it's going to be a long off season, but I think it's going to be a fun and exciting off season. No shortage of content. So
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this roster takes shape, and I think we're going to see some important things in the next 2 weeks. We're going to have the staff starting to get finalized, and then we'll get some decisions from Casey and Garrett Nelson, and I'm sure we'll start to see some transfer portal additions too. So we'll get some recruits getting visits and stuff like that as well. And so I would also expect the early signing day is coming up in about 3 weeks, and Nebraska's going to try to sign
December
50.
21st.
But I think that late period, Nebraska is going to be really active in that stretch too. And you saw that last year from like USC, LSU. There's lots of that 4-star DN that Nebraska offered yesterday from Texas is ranked in the 250s. He's not committed anywhere. So there's a lot of talent still out there, and a lot of players that are getting reevaluated again after their senior years, and their rankings are rising. And so you're going to see teams that are like battling it out for guys that are ranked like 1,000th. That's because the guys like totally criminally underranked. And so if you see like Georgia, Clemson, and Nebraska fighting for 3-star guys, that's because the kid's made a big leap in his senior year, and that a lot of that stuff happens. And those are the types of players that the staff needs to prioritize, not only right now, but after that first wave, that initial early signing period ends.
Well, even the running back that they've offered from Colorado, who was originally at Colorado. He's a AJ Newberry. He's a good player as well. I was watching some of his highlights yesterday, and I think there is a lot of talent that goes unnoticed simply because not only Texas but states like Florida, California, they're just rich with football talent. So I'll be interested to see how this all plays out. And I think early signing period is from December 21st to December 23rd. So I'm curious to see how many new faces will be in the program by that time. But I'd expect Nebraska to be more active starting in the January, I would say, because that will give the staff time to evaluate the areas that they really want to get to, and also kind of establish their recruiting identity as it relates to this program.
Yeah, and there's I'm watching Malachi Coleman if he's going to sign, because he's not enrolling early, so he could push his signing to the later period, which I think would be worrisome for Nebraska. William Watson, I think, is a guy to watch. Hayden Moore. So there's a few guys I think that are still the tight end. I'm blanking on the last name, but
Um, oh, I
Bramer,
know, yeah,
but
Benjamin Brahmer. Yep.
yeah, Iowa State's making a put, and he just had a hell of a game in the C championship in Nebraska. So, I think he's an important guy for Matt Rhule and to the staff to connect with. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be some guys that might get flipped. Especially with Mickey being gone. I'd probably worry. We'll see if Mickey's here, I'll feel a lot better about it. I think we'll get that answer relatively soon, but I know that's a lot that's on everybody's mind. But I think we just need to realize too that it's up to Mickey too. It's a two-way street, and I understand if Mickey doesn't want to stick around here, but I hope that he does. And because I do think that it's still, even though I'm not saying you have to be a Nebraska guy, but it's nice to have those ties on staff. And he did an amazing job as the interim head coach, and I do think at some point he should get a head coaching job somewhere.
Yeah, he's a very good football coach, and I think I wouldn't blame him if he left. I think he deserves an opportunity to really kind of spread his wings, so to speak. But I would love to have him back on staff for sure. He's a great recruiter, and I think with the way this staff recruits and identifies talent and develops talent, I think Mickey would be a good fit here.
Yeah, I agree. He could be, wide receivers coach. Last year he was passing game coordinator, so I mean, he could still have that title, and associate head coach, and it doesn't matter what you pay him. Just because he's not a coordinator doesn't mean he can't make $1 million. That's just stupid thinking. You're basically paying the guy to recruit and to develop elite talent at wide receiver and to help establish your culture. And all those things are critically important. I think Matt Rhule knows that, and that's why, I like that he, talked to, Mickey Joseph. I like that he talked to Scott Frost. He talked to Tom Osborne. He's kind of done all those things, and he's not going to throw Scott Frost under the bus. And I think that's a good thing. We all need to move forward. We need to move past that era and get behind this coach. And, someday maybe Scott can come back as a player and we can celebrate. He did win a national championship here, and he did a lot of great things for Nebraska, but it just wasn't the right fit for him as head coach. And Matt Rhule does seem like the right fit. I think Trev Alberts did a great job in this. And, I think that we're going to be set up. I think this program is set up for a lot of success in the next, 5 to 7 years.
I agree, and this type of builder is exactly what Nebraska needs. I'm excited to see what the rest of the staff looks like, and I'm excited to see not only for Nebraska but just in general what this transfer portal season, so to speak, is going to look like. Because we already mentioned McNamara in the transfer portal. There's big names there already, so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and I'm just really excited about where this program is headed, and how they'll tackle you know these next couple of years.
It's definitely going to be exciting. And so, for all your Nebraska content, make sure that you're following along here at, the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. Like this video, get into the comments section, make sure you subscribe, tell your Nebraska, friends that are fans to follow the page so they're not missing out on our content. I've got a lot of stuff at Husker Big Red. Danny's got a lot of stuff at the greatcornholio.org. And we're going to have a lot more, not only on Matt Rhule and his staff, but, on the basketball team. And so, make sure that you're following along. And, I think we'll wrap it up here today. Do you have any final thoughts for the day, Danny?
I'm just excited to get this thing going, and I aspire to be as energetic as Matt Rhule at 6 a.m.
Let's
So
rule the day.
rule the day,
Every
rule the
day.
West. Yep.
Rule the West, rule the nation.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks again for joining us. We're all psyched about Matt Rhule. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.